Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Letters to No One. This one's a little bit different. The person who wrote to me asked me a question about if I had any tips on how to dissolve the feeling of weight. And uh, basically, it launched me into a full on inquiry investigation. So instead of just reading the letter that I wrote back, I'm actually going to space it out so that you have time to do the inquiry along with the letter. If you're driving or doing something where it would be unsafe to do so, please do not. Otherwise, you can get comfortable, settle in, and this is kind of in the sixth fetter realm. So we're looking at what we take to be um, things which are real, the sights in front of us, the sound of the birds, the feeling of weight and gravity, things like that. And we're investigating it to see how much of it is an actual sensory phenomenon and how much of it is an overlay, some sort of mental add-on that we um, use to make something out of nothing ultimately. So the person wrote, I just re listened to the Dissolving the Boundaries meditation you just posted. Do you have any tips for dissolving the concept or sensation of weight? When I simultaneously notice my hand in my lap and butt in the chair, the butt feels so much heavier. I used to do this with a heavy rock in one hand and a lighter object about the same size in the other. Somehow it was easier than the body. Even though there is approximately the same surface area, an image, I realize, of sensation, one feels denser or heavier. I can visualize claws for hands with the same sensation, and it's entirely convincing because it's a similarly weighted object. When I imagine a big wad of cotton or a cloud for my butt, it is less convincing. Also, isn't sensation also an interpretation or thought? It seems like the noticing of anything is a thought. Vision and sound can appear to be collectively confirmed thoughts, but still thoughts nonetheless. Is this because I still imagine a noticer or thinker? So I said, Good morning. This is such an interesting question. It's not something I've spent much time specifically looking at, so I've been sitting and investigating it and feeling into how to work with it. I tried sitting on the couch with my legs stretched out and could feel a lot of heaviness in the butt. I placed my hand next to me on my couch to feel the weight of just the hand. Feeling into it, at first it seemed like there was obviously more weight in the butt than the hand, but, and this is where I would suggest that you start following along in whatever similar situation you can put yourself in. What is it that we take to be the feeling of weight? At first, you can sense the surface area of the butt and the seemingly disproportionate amount of pressure there compared to in the palm of the hand pressing against the couch. But if you notice and ignore that subtle cue that says that this pressure equals weight, it just starts to become pressure, right? And notice if your attention is drawn more to what appears to be the bigger surface area of pressure. If there's more attention on the butt than there is on the hand, shift the amount of focus to the hand and see what happens. For me, the hand starts to feel more and more sensation. And when I check back in with the butt, it's much less substantial. And the hand feels much heavier than the butt. In fact, after a few minutes, I had the feeling that I wouldn't physically be able to lift my hand at all. You can try this out for a moment now. But this is just playing with the perception of weight, not fully dissolving it. For that, I would suggest to investigate what the feeling of weight actually is. Is there any difference in your actual experience between weight and pressure? Weight is built from the feeling of pressure on the plane between the butt and the sofa, combined with the sensations of the rest of the body. The feeling of the belly pushing down, muscles sagging, the shoulders hanging, the head pulling on the neck, etc. This full mass of the felt body is assumed to be the cause of that feeling of pressure in the butt. You can take a moment to investigate the rest of the sensations in your body right now. Do you feel other parts of the body that seem to be contributing to the feeling of weight, pressure? Also, see if there are any of those subtle mental bodily images playing a part in creating this sense of weight. Do you see any images in the mind that seem to correspond to the parts of the body that feel dense and impacted by gravity? Again, just notice if you can actually see a picture in your mind of your legs on the seat, of your shoulders hanging down, of your back against the chair, of your feet against the floor, whatever's there. And notice if that image is helping to contribute to the feeling of solidity, the feeling of weight and heaviness, of those sensations. Now, if you feel into the boundary, like we do with the dissolving meditation, it's clear that it's not really weight, right? At first, it's just a feeling of pressure. And the only reason you can determine that this weighs more than that, or that there is more pressure here than there, is by comparison. Are you noticing this feeling of pressure and subtly comparing it to the space around the sensations of pressure? Or the pressure in the hand or the feet or somewhere else? Investigate this now. By tuning all of your attention on the butt sensation, what exactly is it that gives you the idea of weight or pressure? If you stay with it, doesn't it start to dissolve? What is pressure but just a density of tingling or vibration? As you stay with that sensation, do you notice it start to dissolve and change and become less and less substantial? Once most of it has dissolved, do you still find a thin line of pressure right at the boundary of butt and chair? If so, play around shifting the focus of attention deeply on whatever feels like pressure, and then expanding the attention out into the more open, lighter sensations around it. And see what that provokes in terms of the realization that weight and pressure are not fundamental sensations. If you stay in the place where the most pressure seems to be and remove all labels from it, does this too start to dissolve? Now, feel the hand on the couch. Is there still a difference in sensation between the two? Do you have any subtle mental images of the body, the butt, the hand, or anything that seems to be reinforcing the reality of the body and suggesting that it must feel a certain way because it needs to conform to the mental image? If you do see those mental images, you can allow them to be there, but just notice that they aren't actually pointing to something real. It might have little to nothing to do with the actuality of the body part. So just let it drift off or remain lightly in the background and keep all of your attention focused on the raw sensation, the physical sensation that you are putting your attention on. Another approach is to play with the difference in size between the butt and the hand. To do this, can you place your attention sort of 50-50 between the two? And then, feeling the sensations under the hand, mentally imagine the sensations getting larger, taking up more surface area than you intellectually know that they do. And at the same time as the hand seems to be expanding, imagine the sensations under the butt to be shrinking and taking up less and less space. Can you feel how disproportionately large the hand is compared to the butt now? Another thing to try is to again split the attention 50-50 between the butt and the hand and feel the general tone of pressure sensations. Again, strip off the labels and just be with the tingling sensations that are there. As you do this, see if you can feel any separation from the sensations in the butt and the hand. Is there a difference between them? Does it start to feel more like one unified field where there really is no more density in one place than anywhere else? Okay, so that ends the inquiry portion of the letter. After that, I answered a couple of shorter questions that the writer brought up. So the person inquired, also, isn't sensation also an interpretation or thought? To which I replied, of course, everything we sense is a filtered, contrived, poorly rendered simulation of something which can't be fully experienced or understood. But this is the limitation of our human sense faculties. We can dissect as many layers of delusion and conceptual overlays as we can, but ultimately we will never have a true, raw, unfiltered perception of anything. So all of this is said on the level which digs down as far as we can go, knowing full well that we have no access to whatever is underneath it. The person then asked, it seems like the noticing of anything is a thought. Vision and sound can appear to be collectively confirmed thoughts, but still thoughts nonetheless. Is this because I still imagine a noticer or thinker? I replied, there are probably a couple of ways to answer this. First off, by collectively confirmed thoughts, do you mean that we have a generally consistent way of viewing the world, such that we can talk about red stop signs and yellow daffodils and have a seemingly similar experience of these things with moderate variations? I do resonate with the idea that we are all living out of our own controlled hallucinations, and it's only when our personal hallucination starts to become too far out of sync with the rest of our society that we are told there's something wrong. When it comes to the difference between thinking and noticing, we have to be really vigilant when it comes to noticing, there it is again, how quickly self-generated referring thoughts pop online immediately upon making contact with an object. Aside from all of the judgments and corresponding physical sensations that accompany them, which I'm sure you're aware of, have you noticed the subtle bouncing back to just created memories about the object that you're currently looking at? For instance, you're looking at a plant, and there's a pulling back and forth between seeing the object with no labels in direct experience and then very subtle memory/conceptualized images of the same object. It's like a way of understanding and creating the object proper out of the shapes and colors that are appearing. And yes, this helps reinforce that illusion of there being a noticer because it is seeming to ping pong back and forth between the external object and the internal image of it, even though upon closer inspection, both are happening in exactly the same space. There is only an illusion of externality or internality of the objects. We cannot say that the thoughts about the thing are happening anywhere other than where the objects are appearing. The object is neither outside of you nor inside of your head. Both are concepts that overreach and try to pin down something inexpressibly different. There is a seemingly consistent perception between the memories and the raw experience, and that is taken to be the knowing or remembering of the object. And that implies and reinforces the sense of being the self who knows. It's only an implication, like the idea that there must be a hearer to hear. So if it feels like there's a knower or thinker, trace it back to where it seems to be coming from. Is the thinker a combination of moving thoughts, images, and physical sensations in the body? How exactly is it created? If the sense of a perceiver and perception are not present, then the feeling of a thinker or witness becomes irrelevant. The lack of distance and perception can't coexist with the feeling that there is someone separate who is perceiving or recognizing a scene. Thank you for your question. It's been fun exploring it. So I hope you had an interesting experience if you were playing along and actually doing the inquiry. And I would recommend doing this multiple times to really get a feel for what I'm pointing at, especially in the later section, in those final paragraphs where I talk about the difference between raw perception and the sort of mental images which are immediately created like a memory to constantly have us ping-ponging back between the actual visual information that's seemingly in front of us and the conceptualized, locked in, uh, labeled version of the object, which is showing up in the mind. And it's like we're constantly going out, in, out, in, out, in to make sense of what seems to be in our external environment and to try to determine whether it is something that is familiar or safe or dangerous, or if we need to do something about it, if it's changing, if it's moving. All of that comes about by this constant checking in with our internal experience compared to the outside external experience. And then once you get a feel for that, you can also start to recognize that there is no internal or external experience, that everything is happening in the same space, that the image which is showing up in front of you is actually happening in exactly the same place as the mental images that are showing up in reference to it. Everybody has different levels of awareness when it comes to the visual field. So for some people, it seems like they have like no internal visual experience at all. And for people with aphantasia, that's apparently actually true. For some of us, we are so synonymous with our thoughts and so not used to investigating deeply what we mean by our thoughts that we tend to take for granted that it's all of one piece. We don't necessarily acknowledge the fact that there are auditory thoughts where we hear our dialogue, internal dialogue going on. Oftentimes it feels like this constant narrator who's just discussing or narrating our life as we go through it. But we also have a lot of visual images, like I referred to, the ones that are from the body, which overlay certain senses, the felt senses. We are constantly checking in. When we feel an emotion, we feel a sensation in the body. We have a thought in some version of these components where if you feel a sad thought, there's going to be thoughts about the situation which are contributing to this feeling which we call sadness. There's going to be physical sensations which support it because they are arising in this situation, some of which might be hormonal. If we're in a frightening situation, we might experience a dump of adrenaline, which creates a certain state in the body, which we interpret to be a feeling of fear or anxiety or terror. But it has to do with the mental images which we are using to immediately categorize and conceptualize what is happening. It might be also an internal dialogue of some sort that relates to it. Thinking that the Indiana Jones scene just popped to mind. Snakes. Why does it have to be snakes? There's like that feeling of terror that comes up in a situation, and then we point to, oh, it's because of the snakes. That's why I'm feeling this sensation in the body. This is why I'm uncomfortable. So getting clear about what is making up all of these different parts of our experience helps us to break apart the thoughts, recognize the changing and fleeting nature of them, and most importantly, the impersonal nature of them. The fact that you are not your thoughts, that just because it feels like there is something here, like a witnesser, a seer viewing the scene, doesn't make it true. It just means that there are certain components that are being falsely combined in such a way that they create the illusion of something else. I've often used the metaphor of the mirage in the desert. You see sand, you see shimmering above the sand, and the mind, which is probably thirsty and in need of water at that point, sees an oasis of water floating just off into the distance. There is no water there, but there are visual components which are creating this illusion when um, filtered and conceptualized by the mind. So this is the sort of thing which I would like you to get more and more accustomed to doing. What we take to be reality, the assumptions through which we navigate the world, the idea that I'm standing upright, that there is distance in front of me, that there is someone in here who is at a distance from the wall 6 feet away from me, the idea that there is gravity and weight pulling me down, the belief that I am located inside of a body, like I am locked in here and driving this vehicle around. All of these things and so many more can get investigated so that we can realize that it's not actually the case. They're functional illusions for helping us navigate a complex world. They're things which we don't necessarily want to get rid of completely, but they're things which create a false sense of identification, which complicates our life, creates suffering for ourselves and for all those around us. And so we just want to take every opportunity we can to see, when we are working with the sixth fetter and the seventh fetter, how much we are creating out of nothing, how much we are building a world out of images and sounds and conceptualizations which have very little, if anything, to do with the actual experience itself. And there can be such a feeling of lightness and openness and joy and contentment when we are engaging with the world in a way that is free from self and free from all of the labels and concepts that we put upon things. Just interacting in a perfectly natural flow with our experience as it shows up is what we're pointing to. It's a way of living a very uncomplicated and non-conceptual life. It's in fact a way of letting life live itself. I think ultimately what we're really saying is that life always does live itself. There never was a you in there who is separate from it. There never was a you who was at a distance from anything else. There never was a you who was locked inside of some sort of cage or a body. It's always been a process of life, evolving, doing its thing, with a few thoughts that created a personal nature where there was none. Some thoughts which created a whole sense of identification where it didn't have to exist. A whole bunch of thoughts to create complications and drama and suffering unnecessarily. So with that, I'll leave you. Thank you so much again for watching. Thank you for writing in. Thank you for commenting and becoming members of the channel. Please feel free to continue writing in questions. I'll do my best to answer promptly, though I make no promises. Love all the interaction, though. And again, if you do write questions, I will always anonymize them if I'm going to use them for letters to no one. I thank everyone for participating and for being open to sharing the process. So thank you so much again, and happy inquiring. Bye.